Our next step in the process is to skin the armature with polymer clay. So we'll take just a quick detour and talk about the polymer and how to get the Sculpey ready to work. You'll notice that when it stays in the box, you can see these grease stains on here. What polymer clay is it's polyvinyl chloride, so PVC resin, mixed with a plasticizer. And the longer it sits in this paper box, the plasticizer starts to leach out, and that's why it can really get dry. I prefer to take it out and wrap it in aluminum foil. The foil is quite inert, and it'll just last a little bit longer. So if your material is fairly fresh, it should be fairly soft right off the bat, and just by squishing it in your hands. I also like to sometimes roll it into a snake, twist it a little bit, roll it again. So the act of rolling it out, twisting it around each other, really starts to soften it up. And again, so this is probably pretty good. You could probably start sculpting with that right away if you wanted to. If you're going to do a lot of this, I would consider investing in a pasta machine or a clay roller. And so it has two rollers in it, and just one adjustment, and it just speeds up the conditioning. Or if you're mixing colors, when we mix in the flocking, I'll be using this as well, because it just goes a lot faster. I'm not really too concerned about bubbles, because we don't use large flat sheets. And then by adjusting this, you can adjust the thickness of the material. And you can do this by hand. You can use a roller. These acrylic rollers actually work quite well for Sculpey. Just roll it on glass so it peels out. So that's good for us to be able to skin the armature. Let me just talk about mixing colors quick, since we're here and we're set up. Same thing. If you don't have the roller, just start by squishing it together. Roll it out into a snake. Braid it a couple times. You also see that the red and orange, the warm pigments, really come off on your hands quite a bit. So keep that in mind if you've been mixing red Sculpey and then you want to also add some white Sculpey. Okay, so we've been able to make that kind of electric orange with the pasta machine. Mixing those colors is a lot faster. We can just keep folding it over on itself. All right, so let's get set up and put this skin on our armature, and maybe even start sculpting soon. Okay, so we've got our armature. I've rolled out some just some plain Super Sculpey. I'm not worried about the adding color or anything to it. I rolled it out fairly thin, and I'm just going to apply a thin skin over the entire armature. Don't worry about the lumpiness from the tin foil. You'll start to notice already that polymer is is more of a material that you push around rather than a material that you carve. And so when I come up the back here, you can kind of stretch it. I want to avoid overlapping big chunks, again, because I'm thinking about the symmetry, and so I'm just going to tear that off and just keep my overlap to a minimum. Not being too fussy here, clearly. Pinch that and get that off. Again, giving it a good squeeze so I make sure it's compressed on there. This is just going to be just the first layer, so we're seeing a consistent color. It's a little hard to read form off of the aluminum foil. Okay, don't get tempted to start sculpting details in right now. I promise we'll get to that, but we're a long way from that stage. Okay, remembering to keep that negative area under the chin. Smush it right into the aluminum foil, just with my thumb blending it. Again, giving it a good squeeze. Trying to maintain as much symmetry as I can right now, so I'm really being intentional. You notice I'm using both hands at the same time whenever possible. That helps you maintain symmetry as well. It's really tricky, particularly on humanoid forms, is to sculpt one side and then try to sculpt the other. You'll have one side that's a little stronger than the other, like one arm, one hand. And so it's hard to maintain that symmetry, so like I'm doing here, again, really squishing it up under that chin. So it's a very, very thin layer, but everything is covered. Again, I'm not worried about the lumpiness. I'm not worried about that little spot sticking out. Don't go too nuts trying to smooth out the surface. I'm just trying to make sure there's no seams. Okay, now at this point I might actually try to pose it just a little bit. I thought my pose was, for the sake of the drawing, made sense to draw it straight on. I'm just going to twist that head a little bit. Already that to me is a little more interesting, and maybe just off to the side. Just so it has a little bit of attitude, rather than facing straight out. If this is going to be the median line of the chest, and this is the median line of the head. You can see we've just turned it a little bit and tilted it. Not too extreme, but enough that it has a little bit of expression already. Okay, that's it for this video. We will get into, next video will be a relatively short one, just about sculpting the eyes and placing the eyes. That's something I tend to do early so I can sculpt the lids around them. Thanks, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.